Welcome to week 4 of our time together. I am excited to move into talking about kind of the nuts and bolts of moving through your graduate program and getting to credentialing, licensure, and then also accessing some professional development opportunities. So we'll be breaking that down a bit in this presentation today. First, we really want to talk about the differences between accreditation and the two types of credentialing, certification and licensure. So accreditation is a means of accountability. This is a voluntary act, and this is not regulated by the government. Now, certification is also voluntary, and it's aspirational, and this is the process of becoming qualified as deemed by your other professional colleagues. And then licensure is required, so that sets licensure apart from both accreditation and certification. It's required to legally practice. This is the most rigorous form of credentialing, and it is authorized by a state to regulate the title and practice of counseling. This is really set up as a means to protect the public from any harm that could occur from counselors who are not appropriately licensed and trained. So moving into looking a little closer on accreditation, this occurs at the university level. So this is really what our university, UNC Pembroke, has chosen to be accredited by CACREP to demonstrate that we are in compliance with very high professional, educational, and training standards. This is reviewed on a kind of an 8-year annual basis, and we'll talk a bit about that. But there are two kinds of accreditation. There's institutional, and that's our CACREP accreditation, and then there's specialized. While we do not have this with our program, an example of a specialized accreditation would be for CORE, so rehabilitation programs, the Council on Rehabilitation Education. And again, this is voluntary and non-governmental. It's self-regulating and peer-reviewed, and we'll talk a bit more about that peer-reviewed process as we get more into this PowerPoint. As you've probably heard me say before, and you will hear me say again, CACREP stands for the Council for Accreditation of Counseling and Related Educational Programs. The move toward CACREP really began in the 1960s, and this was generated from ACEs and SACEs. And ACEs and SACEs are both professional organizations that are more geared toward counselor educators and counselor education. But then ASCA was also a part of that, so the American School Counseling Association. And this is really a move to intentionally try and build standardized expectations for counselor education. It was fully incorporated in 1981, and now there are over 200 institutions and about 500 programs that are CACREP accredited. As you'll recognize, even in our licensure standards, CACREP accreditation is referenced because we're showing that we're meeting the baseline of what is needed to become competent counselors upon graduation. Some of the ways CACREP ensures this is by encouraging and promoting continuing development and improvement of preparation programs for counselors, preparing counseling and related professionals to provide services consistent with the ideal of optimal human development. So again, these are standards that really require that we meet the bar for practicing within our profession. And additionally, CACREP encourages collaboration with other groups that focus on accreditation, licensing, and certification to make sure that we stay relevant within the mental health field. So as I mentioned before, the accreditation process is peer-reviewed. So what this means is there is a team of CACREP reviewers that will come out to each university about every 8 years to review all of the syllabi, all of the standards that I mentioned that are in our syllabi, to make sure that the program is adequately meeting the expected standards of CACREP. So what you do as a faculty when it is your term to go up for reaccreditation, you have to submit a self-study document and application. This is a huge process. So really what this requires is going through every single course that your program offers and making sure that every single CACREP standard is met in some way by each course. And if it's not, you have to redesign syllabi in order to meet that. This can also require that you revise syllabi if CACREP standards change. So for example, the most recent CACREP standards are the 2016 standards. And so there's a bit of a window where programs can start to revamp their syllabi to meet those new standards. But when it comes time for a study, you have to have those met. So what happens is after you submit that document and application, there's an initial review, and then a selected group of peers, which are typically counselor educators, will come on site. So for example, for UNC Pembroke, they would come to visit us and they would review all of our documentation. They might visit some courses, they'll talk to students and to other faculty to offer a review, and then they will give back a report to the university. The university then has to respond. So if there are areas where the university has fallen short, they have to respond as to how they will now meet these requirements to be validated for accreditation again. And then finally, after the institution, so for example, after UNC Pembroke would respond by taking concrete actions to meet the gaps in the standards, we would get an accreditation decision. Full accreditation is 8 years. If there's provisional, meaning that you really need to do some more work, but they believe that you have the structures and process to achieve this, you'll get a 2-year approval, and then the team will come back after 2 years and redo the entire self-study and site visit, or they will deny you. Obviously, denial is something that you do not want to happen, because then your graduates are no longer coming from a CACREP accredited institution, which means licensure is going to be more difficult as we get to a time where CACREP is going to be the standard and the norm and even required. So denial is the worst. Provisional is all right because you can still work with that, and full is the most desired because then you get to take a breather for a little bit. You're still implementing all those standards, but you don't have to do another self-study for a full 8 years. I know that I mentioned that CACREP will sometimes change its standards, and so I want to just give you a brief glimpse at a timeline of how CACREP standards have changed for Masters in Counseling programs. So there used to be many separate degrees in Masters in Counseling programs. There was career counseling, college counseling, community counseling, gerontological counseling, marital, couple, and family counseling, mental health counseling, school counseling, and student affairs, and then one doctoral degree, which is counselor education and supervision. And this was up until 2009. Then in 2009, there were some changes. So an addictions counseling degree was added. Gerontological counseling became extinct. That is no longer an option. There's still marital and couple family counseling, also career counseling, but community counseling and mental health counseling merged into one track, which is clinical mental health counseling, which is the track that you all are in. There's also still schools counseling, and then student affairs and college counseling merged to be one, student affairs and college counseling. And again, there's still that doctoral degree, counselor education and supervision. And then for 2016, there is a merger with CORE, which is the Clinical Rehabilitation Counseling Programs. And so that now has been added to certain programs as an option for a program of study. But the 2016 standards are finalized, and you should see in all of your syllabi for your courses that they're adhering to the 2016 CACREP standards now. We have core curriculum that are defined by our CACREP standards, one in professional identity as a counselor, one in social and cultural diversity, one in human growth and development, career development, helping relationships, group work, assessment, and research and program evaluation. So if you have talked to your advisors, you are really trying to knock out 8 out of 9 of these core classes, because that lets you go ahead and start with your practicum. Most programs are required to be 60 semester hours if they're CACREP accredited. That has been a move from 48 to 60 over the last few years. There are track-specific courses. So for example, you all have shared a lot of core courses with school counseling. However, now this is your first track-specific course for clinical mental health counseling. There's also a move to align with ACA's mission and ethical codes, which you all did a lot of work on last week. And then you can also visit the CACREP standards to look more about program requirements. But as of right now, UNC Pembroke is meeting all of these requirements, and we will continue to do so to graduate quality counseling students, which you are. CACREP also has standards for clinical instruction, and these are really requirements for your faculty, but I think it's important for you to know this so that you're aware of the quality of education that you're getting. So all faculty is required to have a doctoral degree and appropriate clinical preparation. We all do. There also needs to be a clinical learning environment, which this would apply to your practicum and your internship settings. When you're having university supervision, there's a required faculty-student ratio of 1:6. So you will often be in supervision groups of yourself and 5 other students, and this is to meet CACREP requirements specifically. Your site supervisors, so not your university supervisors, but your supervisors on your site for your practicum or internship, must have a master's degree and at least 2 years of clinical experience. In our program, you will see that after you complete 8 out of your 9 core counseling courses, you will then be able to enter practicum. This is your first experience in the field. This is your first experience with counseling. And to be in alignment with CACREP requirements, you have to complete 100 hours of practicum on site, and 40 of these are in direct contact with clients. After you complete your practicum, you'll have 2 semesters of internship, totaling 600 hours of clinical work. These 600 hours you'll split in half because one semester you'll be required to do 300 hours, and you'll have to complete 180 direct hours. And then you'll have another semester of 300 hours where you have to do another 180 direct hours. So there's 240 direct hours total required, but you all will be getting 260 hours. And then within these internships, you will also receive formal evaluations from your university and your site supervisors, and you will be evaluating your site supervisors and your university supervisors. So that way, we are ensuring that you as counseling students are meeting all of the required standards to offer ethical and competent care to clients upon graduation, but you're also giving us feedback so that we make sure we're selecting supervisors that are competent in offering you supervision to enable you to grow your skills in ways that are going to benefit not only you, but your clients. In terms of faculty and staff separate from clinical faculty, so these are the faculty and staff that are going to be teaching your core courses, your electives, and your specialty courses. CACREP requires that we have at least 3 core full-time faculty appointments. However, in our program, we have 9 full-time core faculty appointments. Plus, we have 2 administrators with faculty lines, and this is Dean Bryant and Dean McDonald, and they will sometimes teach courses, but the bulk of their responsibility lies in their acting as deans. All of us in the UNC Pembroke program have either earned our doctoral degrees in counselor education and supervision, or we're employed as faculty with maybe having a allied professional education. For example, Dr. Gary Mock is a school psychologist, but he was employed before 2013, and he broadens the scope of our program with his knowledge and expertise. We also have program and clinical coordinators. For our program coordinators for professional school counseling, Dr. Shanika Jones is the program coordinator. For clinical mental health counseling, Dr. Kai Che is the program coordinator. And then for the Wilmington Initiative, Dr. Dana Unger is the program coordinator. Additionally, Dr. Nicole Stargel serves as the field placement and testing coordinator, so she is that clinical coordinator. So CACREP also requires that within clinical instruction, at least 50% of the instructors are doctoral level educated and core faculty members. We absolutely meet this requirement in our program. Additionally, with our organization of the program, you are asked to attend a graduate school orientation where you receive a student handbook, and within that there are detailed academic appeal policies, student retention policies, written endorsement policies, and you're also given advisors that are going to help you build your program of study. All of these materials are accessible via our program website. So here's a link for the program manuals where you can access all of the information that I just talked about. And then these are direct links specifically to the field placement manual, the clinic policies manual, the testing manual, and then a sample plan of study, and then a weekly hours log for when you are getting into those clinical placements. These will be updated every year, so please be sure to check back for the most recent version. So additionally, for certification, this is done by NBCC, the National Board of Certified Counselors. Now, this is a credentialing body that has been around since 1982, and this is one of those voluntary pieces where you can pursue certification as an NCC, a National Certified Counselor, and this is promoting quality counseling through this certification. However, many states require the NCE to be taken, and that's for you to pursue state licensure, not certification, but the NCE does have to be taken and passed to get your certification as an NCC. So it's helpful to go ahead and take it, and it is offered as a part of this program, and we'll talk a bit about that in an upcoming slide. There are certain specialty certifications within NBCC, and you can see these detailed here. I would encourage you, if you're interested in some of these, please explore them a little more. Go ahead on NBCC's website and look at some of these certifications to see if you want to take specialized classes while you're in our program, or if you want to do any types of professional development trainings that would allow you to be certified. So going back to talking about the NCE, so the National Counseling Exam, this is an exam that is required to be taken in order to get your NCC. However, because you are part of a CACREP accredited program, you are offered the opportunity to take the NCE before you graduate. This means that you will have a lower fee, and if you remember in the book, there was a hour requirement for hours of clinical practice that you would have to take before taking the NCE. However, because you're in a CACREP accredited program where there are standardized practicum and internship hours, you will have already gotten this practice experience, so you won't have to do that out in the field. You can go ahead and take the NCE before you graduate, and this gives you a head start when getting into the field where you've knocked that test out. The NCE is also very similar to our comprehensive exam, so the CPCE. So what I would recommend is taking the NCE as close as possible to the CPCE so you don't have to duplicate your studying efforts. You can kind of knock it all out together, and you can jump into your practicum and internship courses and also have the NCE taken care of so that your NCC is waiting for you upon graduation. Moving from certification to looking at licensure, just as a reminder, this is required to practice at a state level. This is the minimum credential for competence. So if we are to imagine kind of like the floor of what you need, the most basic level to practice counseling is a license. Now, if you were to get any certification above that, that is aspirational, that is saying, I really want to hold myself to this higher bar of practice. Now, this is required primarily in private practice, but also in certain public settings, such as federal government, state contracts, through local management entities, and LMEs are entities that are responsible for managing, coordinating, and facilitating or monitoring the provision of mental health, developmental disabilities, and substance abuse services in the areas that they serve. However, there are some exemptions to licensure. So if you hold a different license, you don't need your LPC. So for example, if you are able to counsel with your LMFT, your licensed marriage and family therapist license, that would be a different license. Additionally, if you counsel in a school, community college, or university setting, often you will not have to have a license there. I would, however, recommend working towards your hours for licensure there because, for example, if you are a college counselor in a university counseling center, you can build your hours toward licensure with ease because you'll have quite a plethora of students coming in, and then you'll be able to maybe open up a side private practice and make a little extra income, maybe specialize in some of the clientele that you would like to work with, things like that. Additionally, while you're in this program, you are a student intern and under supervision, so a license is not required. And then some state, federal, or county government agencies will not require one, or if you're a minister or part of the clergy. But just for a little history with licensure, the LPC Act of 1993, which was implemented in 1994, was designed to regulate the activities of persons who render counseling services to the public. This empowers a governor-appointed board to determine what examination you need to take, how issuing and renewing licenses will occur, the adoption of ethical standards, establishing standards for entry and continuing education into the profession, and then additionally, this board is responsible for conducting investigations and hearings. There was an amendment in 2009, the LPC amendment. This was sponsored by LPC-ANC, and it created a tiered licensure system under the LPC Act, and this is for North Carolina. So we have the LPCA, which is the Licensed Professional Counselor Associate, the LPC, which is a unrestricted license. So with the LPCA, you need supervision so that you can accrue your necessary 2,000 direct hours, 3,000 total hours to get your unrestricted license as a licensed professional counselor, an LPC. And then after either 5 years of full-time practice or 8 years of part-time practice, you can go up for your LPCS, so your Licensed Professional Counselor Supervisor, meaning that it kind of comes full circle, that you can use your LPCS as a supervisor to offer supervision to people who have their LPCA. So you will then be helping the new generation of counselors come into their LPC unrestricted license. And this act also increased oversight by the North Carolina Board of Licensed Professional Counselors. So this integrated background checks into the license issuing and renewal process, and then it also sanctioned disciplinary actions when needed. Looking at certain resources for licensure, I would love for you all to spend some time investigating Article 24, Chapter 90, and then Administrative Code Title 29, Chapter 53. These are also your supplemental readings on the syllabus, and they're available on your module for Week 4 or by following these hyperlinks. Article 24 really focuses on defining the scope of practice for counseling and counselors, exemptions from licensure, delineating functions of the board, and then protection of the public through background checks and your professional disclosure statement. Title 21, Chapter 53, it goes through PDS requirements, so professional disclosure statement requirements, which we're going to talk about, and then education requirements, supervision requirements, and licensure requirements. So these are very helpful resources to have at your fingertips. They are updated routinely, so I would advise checking back for the most updated version. Additionally, on here, there's a hyperlink for application forms and instructions, and this will become very useful to you as you move toward licensure. In order to obtain a license, there are 4 main requirements, and I'm going to detail these in the following slides. But briefly to outline them, there's the needed master's degree in counseling, and this is including 60 credit hours. Also, a passing score on the NCE. You have to submit a professional disclosure statement which adheres to certain requirements, and then you have to have experience commensurate with license. So for your master's degree, we've already gone through this, so I'm not going to go through it step by step, but just to kind of reinforce what is needed with your coursework. You have to have coursework in all of these areas to satisfy what is needed for your LPC. Now, this can vary if you choose to move out of North Carolina, so I would recommend really looking at whatever licensure board is for the state that you plan to practice in upon graduation. Some states require a different course load to be taken. Most of them have all of the same core courses, but for example, I believe Florida requires a course in sexuality, which would be a course that we offer in this program, so you'd want to make sure that you would take that as one of your electives or specialties. However, something that is really lovely that Dean McDonald has done is that she advocated to make that a required part of your degree if you're a clinical mental health counselor, recognizing that we are going to be engaging with clients in a way that requires us to have knowledge of gender and sexuality in order to help them obtain their highest level of development and wellness, whether that's on their own or in their family units. So that's something that luckily is required, and you would have already met that requirement if you were to move out of state to, let's say, Florida, for example. Additionally, you have to pass the NCE. This is offered by NBCC. There is also the National Clinical Mental Health Counselor exam, and this is offered by NBCC as well. For North Carolina, we only require the NCE, but certain states require both. For example, Utah requires both the NCE and the NCMHCE. So you might want to consider taking both of those. The NCMHCE, as you read in your book, is going to be more of a practical application of your knowledge, where the NCE is really looking at have you integrated all the knowledge from your core counseling courses. Additionally, I've included a document in this week's module that offers a breakdown of fees that are required to complete all necessary components of your field placement experiences and exams. This is going to tell you how much you're going to have to pay for each exam, how much you're going to have to pay for liability insurance and professional organization membership. Sometimes it can be quite expensive getting started as a counselor. However, you're going to start to see how all of this is going to benefit you. For example, with certain professional organizations, they will give you free liability insurance if you join. This will also allow you to go to their conferences and to present at their conferences. So that's building your resume, building your professional development, and your CEUs, which is your continuing education units. And we're going to talk a bit about those in a moment as well. So to look at experience commensurate with licensure, for North Carolina, an LPCA, so a licensed professional counselor associate, will be given 0 to 24 months after graduation to complete 3,000 hours of clinical work. 2,000 of this has to be direct. Now, it used to be that you had to have all of your hours completed within 24 months. However, that requirement has been done away with, and now you can expand beyond those 24 months if you have not accrued all of your hours. So, for example, if you're working part-time to accrue hours, there's no way you're going to get those 2,000 direct in 24 months. So you now have way more flexibility with your time frame for accruing those hours. You also have to have a qualified supervisor, and I guess a quality, so there's a Freudian slip there. So you need a quality and qualified supervisor that is approved by the LPC Board of North Carolina. For your LPC, this is after you have completed those 3,000 hours of supervised practice, those 2,000 direct that I mentioned. You've had supervision from a supervisor with an LPCS, and you have had at least 100 hours of supervision. At least 75 of these have to be individual, and no more than 25 can be group. And if you see, this supervisor to supervisee ratio is a bit different from what's required in CACREP programs. You can be in a group of up to 12 other supervisees when you're getting licensure supervision. Now, your supervision, much like we do in our internship and practicum, is going to be based on live observation, video, or audio recordings. And you have to have 1 hour of supervision per 40 hours of service. Now, this is not per 40 direct hours. This is 40 hours. So for 1 week of full-time work, you need to have 1 hour of supervision. Now, as I mentioned before, your LPCS you can get after 5 years of full-time experience as a counselor with an unrestricted license. So 5 years with your LPC, full-time working, you can become an LPCS. If you are not full-time and you're working part-time, you can become an LPCS after 8 years of part-time work, making sure that you're getting at least 8 hours a week in of work. So this is going to detail your professional disclosure statement, and this is something that you will be working on while you're in our program, but you will need to have all of these criteria met in order to be approved for licensure at any level. So this is licensure as an LPCA, LPC, or LPCS. So I'm not going to read through all of these requirements, but I'll let you take a moment to pause to look at everything that's going to be required. And this is something that you're going to be building within your internship course. So there's a signature assignment that requires you to develop a PDS, and this is going to be a framework from which you can then build your final one to submit to the LPC board when you are applying for your LPCA. In our program, we model adherence to state requirements in your professional disclosure statements and as you move toward licensure. So that's why we're going through licensure in this way relevant to North Carolina, where our program is based. However, some of you may choose to move out of state, and this link is available for you to explore the website of the state that you hope to practice in the future. So you'll be able to explore what requirements are needed in terms of training, in terms of education, in terms of examinations, and in terms of any other continuing education. You'll also be able to be aware of how many hours are required for you to move from your license that you'll have under supervision to your unrestricted license to practice. You also have other credentialing options. For example, for licensure, you could pursue your LMFT, which is a licensed marriage and family therapist. You could also pursue your LCAS or your LCAS, your Licensed Clinical Addiction Specialist license. You can also get certifications as a certified sex counselor, a master's addictions counselor, or a certified clinical mental health counselor. So there are other options that you can really partake in to build your professional identity in a way that aligns with your future goals. Relatedly, I wanted to break down my credentials, degree, and license to show you concretely what this can look like a few years down the road for you, or maybe many years down the road, depending on what course you choose to pursue for your profession. So my degree is a PhD in counseling and counselor education. In that degree, I also received training in supervision. I have a license right now that is an LPCA, so I do have a provisional license. This is because I have practiced for quite a few years, but a lot of my years were done in Louisiana. Some of my hours that I accrued down there did not transfer over to North Carolina, and I was not fully licensed when I left Louisiana to come back to North Carolina for my doctoral program. So something I would highly recommend for you is if you are planning to pursue your licensure in another state, and if you have to move from that state while you're still in the process of accruing hours to your unrestricted license, make sure that you talk with the counseling board in the state that you plan to move to see what is needed for them to count those hours. If they do not count the hours, you will be duplicating some of the work and receiving extra supervision, which extra supervision is always a wonderful thing. I think that this should even be done after you get your unrestricted license, kind of as a check-in, as a consultation with other professionals in the counseling profession. I do have 2 certifications, that is of a National Certified Counselor and an Approved Clinical Supervisor. I met the requirements for my approved clinical supervisor certification while I was in my doctoral program. Additionally, I maintain professional organization membership every year. I am a member of ACA, which is the American Counseling Association, and ACES, which is the Association for Counselor Education and Supervision, SACES, which is the regional division of ACES, so the Southern Association for Counselor Education and Supervision, ALGBTIC, which is the Association for Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, and Transgender Issues in Counseling. In ALGBTIC, I've really been active because this is a place where my passion lies. I had the honor of being selected as an emerging leader, meaning that I am supporting the board in their work right now, and hopefully will be trying to get on the board at some point in the future. With the emerging leader position, I get to help out with the conference. I get to help the board facilitate initiatives that they have designed for the upcoming year and learn a bit about what being a board member looks like. Additionally, I am an editor for the Journal of LGBT Issues in Counseling. I was also a member of the Association for Assessment and Research in Counseling, AARC, and I was a member of this organization when I was a doctoral student and had the wonderful experience of being the graduate student representative. During this experience, I was able to collaborate with other counselor educators in building standards of care for research and assessment with LGBTQ+ populations. So I would really encourage you to be on the lookout for opportunities like that from certain professional organizations. If you go ahead and join organizations now, you will be eligible to take on some of these positions that will really help you to gain experience in building the baselines, the standards, the expectations for those engaged in the counseling profession. So CEUs, Continuing Education Units. We've mentioned these a lot. These are hours that you accrue to show that you are consistently engaged in training and learning to maintain your competence in the profession of counseling. CEUs can be gained when you attend trainings, when you complete coursework. So maybe if you want to go back and take an additional graduate class, you can earn CEUs for that. If you engage in professional development, like attending conferences, going to seminars, watching webinars, participating in webinars, and you need to get a certain number of these hours per year. For your NCC, you need 100 hours of CEUs every 5 years to make you eligible for renewing your NCC. For your LPC, whether that's an LPCA, an LPC, or an LPCS, you need to accrue 40 hours of continuing education units every 2 years, with 5 of these units in ethics so that you can stay fresh in this. Now, these 5 units are satisfied by the jurisprudence exam that you'll have to take in your renewal process. Something I will highly recommend is when you go to conferences, sign up for CEUs, keep your CEU certificates because you will need to submit these to the board for verification of attending these CEU opportunities. So I just wanted to put some acronyms on here. I know that we've used a lot of acronyms throughout the day, and I just wanted to have these up here so you can kind of test yourself on if you can say what all of these acronyms stand for. I will go ahead and put a list on the notes section of this PowerPoint that defines each of these acronyms, but I'd love for you to kind of play a game and see if you can get all of these or see how many you can get without looking at that answer key. So finally, before graduation, and this is what you need to have on your radar. So looking out at the horizon, you're going to need to take the National Counselor exam, so the NCE, and you're going to prepare your NCC paperwork so that you can become a nationally certified counselor upon graduation. Also, explore the licensure board of which state you plan to practice in as soon as you graduate, because you might want to consider taking the NCMHCE. Additionally, you will need to keep paperwork from your practicum and internship experiences that verifies that you have had a certain amount of hours of graduate counseling experience. You'll also want to complete your LPCA paperwork, and you can submit paperwork early and have licensure pending status. You can look online at this through the NC Board of Licensed Professional Counselor website. So keep an eye on the NCB LPC calendar because the board will only meet every quarter to discuss any new applicants for licensure. So you'll want to make sure that you have all of your paperwork in as soon as possible, as close as possible to those deadlines. Now, you won't need to worry about submitting any of this until you're in your last semester of internship, but just keep this on your radar. Additionally, when you're looking for a job, remember that in your interview, you are going to be interviewing this place that you're choosing to work just as much as they're interviewing you. We'll talk more about that next week as we look at work settings and preparing for the job search. With the job search, something that's important to ask is, will supervision be provided while you are practicing with your provisional license, so with your LPCA? If not, you're going to need to line up supervision with an LPCS so that you can ethically and legally practice. So I hope that this presentation has been helpful in really kind of delineating and clarifying some of the critical pieces that you need to know working through this graduate program and preparing for graduation and eventually professional practice. If you have any questions, please let me know. I'm happy to talk about any of this in more depth and happy to explore with you what licensure looks like in other states if you plan to move out of North Carolina. Though I will say that it would be lovely to keep your talent and your expertise that you are building and honing in our state. I know that we have a lot of clients that could really use that. All right, everyone, thanks for joining me, and I look forward to talking to you on the discussion board.